Good evening and welcome to Information Please, your Peoria Public Library on the air, bringing you information about your library and your community. This evening my guest is Roberta Koshalski, who in addition to being the Assistant Director at Peoria Public Library is the co-chair of Peoria Reads, along with Connie Voss from Commonplace, and they've been working together a long time to bring us this great One City, One Book program. Hi, Roberta.
Hi. Since 2002.
2002, yeah, I know I've been at the library a while now, but it predates me. It was already going when I came along. But how did Peoria Reads get started?
Commonplace and Peoria Public Library were each thinking about starting a One City, One Book project separately. And I think it was a day when I was over at Commonplace, and the former executive director there, Nancy Rakoff, said, would the library be interested in working with us on a One City, One Book program? Well, yes, and as a matter of fact, we were thinking about it as well. So, and that was about the summer of 2001.
Okay.
And so Nancy and I put together some, kind of a one-sheet fact sheet to send to prospective partners. And we scheduled a date for the first meeting, and that date happened to be September 11th, 2001.
Oh my goodness.
So we did meet at Commonplace that day with kind of a TV off, in
the corner to see what was going on.
And it was kind of a fitting day for that to start, because definitely a need for people to talk to each other across ages and races and socioeconomics, and to talk about significant issues. So.
Oh yeah. Well, and usually we're start talking about Peoria Reads as it gets, towards the end of the year, but we're bringing it up today because we had some very exciting news in the last month, and that is that we got
the big read, and our committee kind of does meet year-round when we finish reading and discussing the previous year's book, in which case it was the Peoria Reads 2015 title, which was Enrique's Journey.
Yes.
We had an evaluation meeting along with a meeting about what we should do for next year, and there was the opportunity to apply for the Big Read funding again, which is through the National Endowment for the Arts, and they have the same goal with the Big Read pretty much as Peoria Reads, and that's to get communities reading the same significant book and talking about the book together across demographics, and then attending community events so that people can learn more about the themes and the topics of the book.
Yeah, what's going on in the book.
So we tried to, there's a list of about 35 titles. If you participate in the Big Read, you have to go with a book on their reading list.
And we've done that before. We've had...
for 4 years in a row, something like 2008 through 2011, somewhere in those years, we had done books like The Great Gatsby and Fahrenheit 451, To Kill a Mockingbird, and Maltese Falcon.
Right, books that were considered classics.
Right.
And so we had done those and then taken a break from that because we didn't get the funding, but now we've got it again. What's the big advantage of having this grant and the funding?
Well, there's a few advantages. One, of course, is the funding and the fact that you can purchase copies of the book to give to people participating and who want to read the book, such as book clubs. We always have a following of book clubs who do pick up the Peoria Reads book and then talk about it in their club meeting. And then for schools, the book we've selected for 2016 is appropriate for high school and up, so high school, colleges, to get them involved in reading the book. And just more publicity. They give us some banners, although we have our banners from previous years. And each book comes with a reader's guide and a teacher's guide, and these are electronic now. We used to get boxes upon boxes of reader's guides, but now they're online, and so people can use those for their classes or book clubs.
Yeah, it's nice to be able to put that on your tablet or whatever, because a lot of people are using that, and you can have that right there with the book, whether you're reading a paper book or an electronic book. And it's the thing that's great about it is the library just can't get enough copies of the book for everybody in town to read it. So when we don't have the funding to buy books, that's the issue is can you get enough can you get them checked in and out enough to get everybody to read them?
Right.
And so.
And another advantage of participating in the Big Read is they have a series of webinars once you've found out you've gotten the grant. It used to be there was an orientation in Minneapolis that just 2 members of the planning committee could go to. It was about a 1.5-day orientation.
Sure.
But now they've changed that to webinars, which is good because more than just 2 people can attend.
Yeah.
And this year there were 4 webinars on different topics, and you can also talk to other people who have participated or are participating, people who have done your book before and maybe have some tips about events and ideas. So we did that at the beginning of June, I think, to attend those webinars.
Yeah, because of course those aren't in the same city, and if they have something that's really successful that you think would work here, then you know the plan's already made, the work's pretty well done, and you can just go ahead and do it. So.
And so the projects, the project that we're funded under, 75 projects across the United States got this funding, and they're doing their programs anywhere from September of 2015 through June of 2016.
Okay.
So,
all right. Well, we should reveal. There's our book.
there it is, Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien. And the little gold seal at the top right there is, that's the 20th anniversary edition. This book was first published in 1990.
Okay.
Actually, 20 years after the author Tim O'Brien served in Vietnam. This is a semi-autobiographical account of his experiences in Vietnam. It's classified as fiction because it's very interesting to read because the author himself will tell a story, and the book is it's less than 250 pages.
Yes, it is a very short book.
Yeah,
for
short,
people who don't
large print.
even like to read can manage this one.
And then what's helpful is it's written in, they call it sometimes a novel in stories, because fairly short chapters, and so you can, if you need to, put it down, pick it up again, and still not lose anything.
Yeah, you can.
And so he talks about it as, he talks about the difference about story truth versus happening truth. That, and sometimes story truth is more true when you read about someone's experiences in war or anywhere else, rather than reading the facts, what happened. And it's a book that is used either in excerpts or in its entirety at both Bradley and ICC. So when it was announced that we did get the funding to do this book, we've gotten a response from both places.
Yeah, they're interested in partnering and doing programs, that kind of thing.
Right. And so it is considered one of the finest books about the Vietnam War. It started with the story, which is the first chapter, which is called The Things They Carried. And that was published, and it did receive an award for that short story. And that short story was published in the annual Best Book of American Short Stories. And other stories in the book have been published in other magazines too.
Yeah.
And so, he collected them, tied them all together into this book.
Yeah. Well, it's been a long time since I've read or watched anything about the Vietnam War, which of course I grew up with. And so I was surprised how this book took me right back to those days in the 60s and 70s when this was going on. And it has such parallels to things that are happening now for our country and our soldiers, and just even the language in the book, the words that are used are words I've not, heard in a long time, and that were everyday words. And so for me, it was an interesting book, and I think it will be for many, many people, whether they lived through those times or have just heard about them, or not on the radar screen young enough that it's not really on the radar screen and don't know.
That's it. So many of the people we work with or who are our friends or whatever, they weren't born yet, or they were so young that,
it doesn't
virtually
have an
no
impact.
memories.
Or they might have had a grandfather that fought in Vietnam, that kind of thing. And it just, it's interesting because I think it's a book that generations will be able to talk about people who experienced it, whether they went to Vietnam, and many of our soldiers still won't talk because, you know, it's just at the time they didn't want anybody to know because they were just berated for having been a soldier.
Right.
And here in Peoria, we just in the last few months had a welcome home parade for Vietnam veterans because it had been 50 years or something. And that's just crazy that it takes 50 years to honor somebody for their service to our country.
And one of our strong partners this year is the American Legion,
Yes,
the local
that's
American
very
Legion.
exciting.
We have a direct tie through Terry Miller, the head of outreach services at the library, and she's been involved in the American Legion since she's been born. I think she was signed up through her parents, you know, shortly out of the hospital after her mom gave birth.
I think so.
And
She
she's
probably went to her first meeting that week.
a lifetime member, and so she helped us secure a letter of support for the Big Read grant for the funding, and then, you know, they were very interested that we were choosing to have our community read this book, and so we've talked with them about perhaps participating in a panel discussion about the Vietnam War experience and perhaps the effects on their families as well, and then too, having book discussions at the American Legion post, the auxiliary, with the auxiliary, and then seeing if we can get some veterans to come to other book clubs in the area and book discussions.
Yeah.
Because you can have a group of people who've never been there talk about the book and have a really good discussion, but it would bring an extra dimension if you would have someone who's been there talk about, you know, their experiences and how they compare to their reading of the book.
Yeah, exactly. What they thought of it and how it compared. And I think that that's been, you know, well done with World War II. We've seen a million movies, we've read a million books. World War II veterans have shared their stories. Some of them have, but there's a lot more of them than there are Vietnam veterans. And there's still families. I know Terry Miller has, you know, families she works with at the American Legion who lost children during Vietnam, and so that's a whole different story too. And in our meetings, we've discussed some of the things that changed radically, like media coverage. We talk about how the media coverage changed, and just, you know, people still remember the protests, and you know, the whole political scene was so different. The music, there was so much music that was based on war protests, and fashion, you know, the peace sign, and the peace sign's still with us, but I think it's one of those symbols that, you know, doesn't quite have the same meaning as it did back then. Now it's just a decoration, you know, like hearts or bluebirds. But
And so, you know, you've mentioned a lot of things that will tie into our events.
Many things.
We'd like to have display at the library that ties into the time period. We are thinking about maybe 2 series of films. One series that would be feature films about the Vietnam War, and there's so many of them.
There are.
And perhaps showing them at different locations throughout the city.
What might be some of the films we'll show?
Apocalypse Now was discussed in the in one of our meetings. There's a documentary that was put out by Rory Kennedy, and and I can't think of the
Last
title.
Days of Vietnam.
Good, I'm glad you got it.
The Last Days of Vietnam.
And,
I remember that because I just watched that for the first time, and it's very, very good.
Yes.
About what happened as Vietnam fell. But I also had just recently watched We Were Soldiers, which is about the very first days of Vietnam, and it's astounding to watch, you know, these different views of the war.
And we like to have, you know, when we show feature films, not necessarily, but when we show documentaries, leave enough time at the end then so people who want to can stay and talk about it.
Yeah.
And perhaps with a moderator who can bring some focus to the discussion.
Yeah,
And,
and that's a good time also to bring up a little bit about the book, or you know, encourage people to read the book if they haven't.
Yes. And we're so fortunate to be planning now in July for events that will happen in March and April next year.
Yeah.
So we have time to put together a list so that that you will be able to create something
everything
for
out.
us, both on our Peoria Reads website and on paper, so that we can go to, even events this fall. Terry Miller is having a big event at North Branch, including veterans and highlighting veterans, and so a nice place to let people know about what's going to happen and have all the events in place.
It just has happened. Things have fallen together that we will have a lot of focus on our veterans this year, because on November 7th, which is a Saturday, is the big launch of the Our Heroes trees, which Peoria Public Library often doesn't do much with holiday decorations, and that is just part of our respect for people's differing beliefs, that the library should be neutral territory. But Our Heroes trees are all about honoring veterans, and you can look that up on the internet if you're interested in having one at your home or your church or whatever, that they have a specific way you do them with a yellow ribbon on the top and flags. But the public is going to be encouraged to honor the veterans in their lives by making special ornaments that honor them. Will hang on the trees, and we'll have it at all 5 locations. But at North Branch on November 7th, they'll have the National Guard, I think it's the jazz band, and our
the color
councilman,
guard.
the color guard, and Councilman Eric Turner is going to speak, and it's going to be a really great launch for that event. And then those trees, of course, will be up through the holiday season and provide, some interest and focus that everybody can live with at the library.
And so all locations then from, you can come on November 7th, that Saturday, to the nice program, and they'll have the supplies where you can create an ornament for the tree at North Branch, and then those same supplies will be at all of our other library locations, so that
you can decorate
between
the
November
trees
7th
there
and the end of the year.
But if you want to make a really fancy ornament, like more than you can do at the library in 10 minutes, you can make one ahead and bring it with you that day to hang.
Right, so those will be really pretty, and we'll be able to publicize our Peoria Reads, the things they carried throughout. And what a great gift idea for any holidays at the end of the year, to purchase a copy of the things they carried and
give it to people to read.
For someone, because it's an easy book in terms of the length, but it's challenging because there's 1 minute there's humor in it, and then the next minute you're horrified by what's being written about, or a soldier is killed and you feel the emotions, and I've read it a few times, and it's just as powerful or more so every time you read it.
Which it really makes the case that you don't need a huge long book to get your point across, because this is a very short book, and it's very, very powerful. And it's no wonder that this man has won awards, and that this book is revered as the best book written, because it is really, really, really good.
And the author, he was in the middle of his education when he was drafted. He was he had just let's see, let me find his information.
Yeah, we should talk about the author.
Yeah, he had graduated summa cum laude from Macalester College in 1968. In 1969 and 70, he was in Vietnam, and then he pursued graduate studies in government at Harvard. So he was right in the middle there, and then worked as a reporter for a few years, and then
so he really had the perspective from all directions: education, experience, work experience.
And now he's at, for maybe as much as 15 years, he's been at Texas State University, and he holds a chair position, an endowed chair in creative writing. So he holds this chair every 2 years, every other year. So when he's in this position, he teaches creative writing classes, and then on off years, he does other special projects. So
great.
He's very interesting, interesting person. The book too, and I don't know where we are in terms of time, but the things they carried, not just the obvious, what you're carrying with you physically, whether it's photographs or
which
mementos.
the book does start out talking about the things the soldiers carried: mementos, equipment, how much they weigh. You know, there's long lists of that at the beginning, but it's others.
But then, yeah, as you read through the book and the situations they're in, and you know the emotions they're carrying, or the people, the thoughts of the people they carry with them, and I think that can lead you to good discussions about, you know, what do you carry with you, and whether you're going somewhere for a while or just in your day-to-day life, what's part of you and what do you carry? So
What do you keep with you all the time?
Yeah, I'm just anxious to talk about this book with other people and you know, see what they get from it, and yeah, what the response is.
Well, one of my big reactions to this book is I feel like I had forgotten how young the soldiers were, and it's just the stories in it. You remember what an 18 and 19 and 20-year-old boy are, and what these very young men that were in command of other young men, and they're out in these, you know, you don't have that life experience. Yeah, you're young and you're strong and you're healthy, but you don't have life experience. You don't have the kind of thing that could pull you through. And I think when I think about the Army now and the people that have gone to serve, it seems to me many of them are older because they were in reserve units or that type of thing. It seems like the people who've been fighting the wars lately, it just doesn't seem like we sent every 18-year-old in the country over there. And the whole thing with the draft, we haven't had the draft in a very long time. And I'm not sure that the young people now know what that's like. And Jim O'Brien does a great job of explaining that, about the whole dread about being drafted, and you had to be married or you had to be in school, and boy, you graduate from school and they get you, and do you go to Canada, do you not go to Canada, what do you do? And those were huge decisions for
a 19-year-old, 18, 19.
Yeah, high school kids were worried about this. I mean, I think that the people I grew up with spent most of their high school years worrying about, are they going to be drafted? What do I do? Do I need to get married right now?
And what will people think of me?
What will people think of me if I go, if I don't go? It's to have to partake in something that's so politically charged and against your will is just, it's not something we have to deal with at this moment in time.
Because the author Tim O'Brien was born in 1950, and he was there in 69 and 70. So you know, you get out and you're 20 years old, which is so young, but what he has lived through and what he has seen, how do you then interact with other 20-year-olds who weren't there?
Yeah.
You know, and how do you interact with your family then? If you have if you have a wife or
and I
parents.
think that's every soldier's problem when they come home. That's why places like the American Legion and are so important, offering assistance and help, because you come home and you've had this whole experience nobody else has. And so that's what makes it so difficult for soldiers to come back and integrate. And that's why things like doing the Our Heroes tree are important, and to reestablish some of that, I think.
And we've had story times, children's programs where the kids write thank you notes, and sometimes they're given to the veterans when they go on an honor flight, and then when they come back, they receive the letters from
yeah, that's always a fun thing when
kids.
the folks that go on the honors flight can come back and We've got about 4 more minutes here, and I don't think we've talked extensively about all of our partners. I know we mentioned Bradley and ICC, but
I wanted to go back to mention Commonplace. You mentioned
Commonplace
Connie
is
Voss,
our
other lead partner, and
maybe you should explain Commonplace. I'm not sure everybody knows what Commonplace is.
A social service agency on the south side of Peoria, whose mission is to try to eliminate the root causes of poverty and social injustice. One of the ways is through education. They have programs for children through adults, and the adult literacy program has, I think, been going on since the late 60s, right around the time period we'll be talking about. And so every year they get their adult learners involved in the Peoria Reads book, either by reading the book with them in the literacy classes or reading a companion book. Or in this case, I think it would be very appropriate to read excerpts from the book with the adult learners. And so Connie will be involved too in getting copies of the book. So people who may not otherwise be able to get a copy will be able to read the book and be involved in the programs we have. I did mention Bradley and ICC. ICC has been talking about doing a panel discussion about the book. And then Bradley, we have a strong tie with OLLI, which is the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute,
Right.
for adults continuing education for those 50 years of age and older. And they do a growing number of programs year-round.
Pardon me.
Bless you. And so we, in fact, this year have a representative right on our committee coming to the committee meetings,
That's
Carol
great.
May. And she's a fountain of ideas, if anyone knows Carol May. And so putting together documentary film series, maybe some programs on the war and on the country. You know, we are planning and shooting ideas around.
Yeah.
And of course, the American Legion, and which I mentioned earlier, Apollo Theater, who will probably show
The Apollo
at least
Theater has
film,
been a
one
partner
film
for a long
for
time.
many years. Yeah.
It's a great place to be able to show movies. Of course, we have at the library, you know, our great digital sound and projection, both at North Branch and at Main Library, but sometimes, you know, because we can't do things at night, the Apollo fills in and has those at night.
Right,
so.
and that's usually Friday, Saturday night, so a nice weekend thing to do downtown and in that theater, which is so cool.
Yeah, so it's great. We have all these partners that spread the opportunities around. But we're about out of time, so any last thought here?
Read the book, get involved, have your book club do it. Go to PeoriaReads.org. Our events list and more information will be coming out as we move ahead.
Right.
Call 497-2186. That's me at the
Or
library.
2000, or just
2000.
call the library.
Call 2000. Say Peoria Reads or say Roberta. That's me, and
get
we'll
you
talk.
to- Yeah, because of course anybody who wants to be a partner, help us fund, is more than welcome.
Of course.
We'll see you next week on Information Please.